Should you go to grad school? This is a chart I made that'll help you decide whether or not grad school is actually right for you. Starting with the first question, everyone starts here. Do you have a clear target role or outcome in mind for the next 1 to 3 years? So you can pick yes or no for this question. If you picked no, follow-up question from that is, are you mainly applying to grad school to avoid work or life? So again, you can pick yes or no. If you picked yes, follow-up question from that, are your parents very wealthy and happy to bankroll your PhD and lifestyle indefinitely? So you can pick yes or no. If you picked no, then you get the outcome of stop, reconsider what you're doing, because grad school is a very expensive way to procrastinate. Most people who go into grad school to avoid work pressure often drift and they feel lost, lonely, or stuck. Some things you can do instead are to work in a low stakes job, travel, freelance, audit classes, or just build a project on the side where you'll be able to learn faster and cheaper and probably get some clarity on what it is that you actually want to do. But if you picked, yes, my parents are very wealthy and they're happy to pay for my PhD and my lifestyle, then congratulations, truly apply if you want. It's a very expensive hobby, but I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, in my opinion, if your parents are bankrolling your grad school, your PhD, why don't you just like travel and read the books that you want to read, that you were gonna read for grad school, or like make a short film, become a vibe curator, fucking gallery owner, DJ, what the hey, the world is your oyster. Because do you realize how lucky you are? If you want to pick structured schooling on purpose, you can learn in other ways, right? Which are more fun. Get real estate, tell your parents to use the $100K a year for your degree, which you're using as a gap year anyway, to buy you an apartment. Okay, come on now. Going back to the previous question, if you had picked no for the question of are you mainly applying to avoid work or life, if you picked no, then I would still pause, talk to 5 people in roles that you want or in jobs or destinations, outcomes that you want, and figure it out after getting more data. Because without a clear goal of what you're trying to get out of grad school, it's most likely going to lead to burnout and bitterness. So that wraps up the first branch of this diagram, which is if you don't have a clear target role or outcome for the next 1 to 3 years. But if you picked yes, I do have a clear goal, outcome, target that I want to hit in the next 1 to 3 years, then the follow-up question from this is, does the role or the outcome that you want strictly require you to go to grad school or to get licensure? So for example, some outcomes that might strictly require you to go to grad school might include if you want to get into medicine, law, clinical psych, vet, pharmacy, or if you want to get into tenure track academia, then you need grad school. You strictly need grad school, because if you don't have grad school, then you have no access at all to any of these paths. I hope that makes sense to you. So you should pick yes, this role strictly requires grad school if that's you. But if you want to go to grad school because it'll help your career, or if it's like something that's like merely helpful but ultimately optional, then you should pick no for this question. So just to clarify it a little more for you, so like for PhDs specifically, right? If you're thinking of doing a PhD with the goal of getting into academia, so like tenure track academia, where the degree itself is 100% required for university research tenure track roles, right? So like where you can literally not be hired as a professor or an independent researcher without a PhD, then you should pick yes for this question. But if you're doing a PhD and your goal is not to stay in academia, or where it's not strictly necessary, then you should pick no for this question. If you're doing a professional doctorate, so like a JD, an MD, PsyD, etc., those are all professional things where like you strictly require that to get your licensure, then you should pick yes for this question. Okay, now that that's out of the way, so if you picked yes for this question, grad school is strictly required, then the follow-up question from this is, what type of required degree are you planning on going into? So for this, you can pick out of 4 options. So the first one is PhD for tenure track academia. Number 2 is degrees in medicine, dentistry, nursing, vet, or pharmacy. The third option is doing a law JD or a GDL. And the final one is doing professional psychology, therapy, social work adjacent degrees. Okay, starting with the first branch, if you picked you want to do a PhD with the goal of getting into tenure track academia, follow-up question from that is this fully funded? So like your tuition is being paid and you have a stipend for your PhD for grad school. So if you picked no, my PhD is not fully funded, then you get the outcome of I think you should reconsider. So the reason I say this is because a lot of the times PhD programs in like very highly academic fields, so like if you're doing STEM, humanities, social sciences, if the PhD in these fields doesn't waive tuition or pay a stipend, then oftentimes that is a signal, because if a PhD is serious about placing people into tenure track academia, it's almost always funded. And that's because departments often expect you to spend lots of years teaching or researching already at very low pay while building expertise. So if they don't offer funding, it often means that they don't expect most of their graduates to land academic jobs. So instead they're monetizing the degrees. So they're becoming like tuition driven. So I'm suggesting here that you should probably reconsider or just think very carefully about what you want to do, because most unfunded students end up with heavy debt and limited career support. And there's also an issue nowadays where there's an oversupply of PhDs where like half of faculty jobs are contingent with no benefits. Some other options you can consider might be like pursuing funded programs only, or redirect your interest into like research jobs, fellowships, or part-time teaching, which allows you to keep your income stable.
By the way, if you want to get a digital copy of this file, of this flowchart for your easy reference, then you can do so in the link above or also in the description.
Okay, going back up to that question, if you answered yes to my PhD is fully funded, so like tuition, stipend, it's fully funded, then follow-up question from that is, can you handle loneliness, self-directed work, frequent rejection, and an uncertain job market? So you can pick yes or no for this question. So if you picked no to that, then again, I would tell you maybe reconsider, because maybe a PhD is not right for you. Because a lot of outcomes in doing a PhD involve isolation, stress, and attrition. So instead of doing that, you might look into like an applied master's program. I would also research jobs in the industry or like project-based roles that could use your skills, but they don't require you to spend many, many years doing solitary work. But if you picked, yes, I can handle loneliness, self-directed work, frequent rejection, uncertain job markets. So follow-up question from that is, can you accept losing prime years of income and savings? So what I mean by this is, when you're doing a PhD, right? Like when you're in like a 5 to 7 year program and you're earning a small stipend, or like sometimes none at all, oftentimes you're missing out on the chance to like build real savings or like advance in a career. And the money that you're not earning in your 20s or your early 30s because you're doing a PhD, it compounds less over time. So you're not just potentially losing salary now, you're also potentially losing future wealth and stability. So the question here is, do you accept that you might be losing these prime years of compounding interest effect of your income and your savings? So if you picked no for this question, again, you get the outcome of I would reconsider or I would think more carefully, because the lost earnings and savings, a lot of the times, it very likely outweighs the upside of going to grad school. So some alternatives you can consider might be to like go into industry first, so like get a job in the field now, build a portfolio of publications, and then revisit grad school later on with more clarity. Something else you could do might be to get a shorter qualification or like a shorter credential, so like certificates, professional diplomas, or like even doing a part-time master's so you can continue earning money while studying. You should also see if you can get like employer-sponsored studies, so like where a company actually pays for you to like go do a master's or a PhD. Another thing you can do is, obviously you should work on your own independent projects, so like publish, research, or create without the sunk cost of tuition of like a PhD or a master's. And it's especially possible if you're working in fields like tech or writing or policy. And obviously the final option is you should always save up and you can always return to grad school later, right? So if you build a financial cushion first, you're not sacrificing the time in your 20s, your early 30s, and like the compound interest to grad school right now. Okay, moving back up on that question, if you actually picked yes, you can accept losing prime years in your early 20s and 30s, then the follow-up question from this is, are you okay with limited control over where you live? So what I mean by this is, when you finish a PhD, right, and you go onto like the tenure track job market, a lot of the times, usually you're not going to be able to pick where you live. And that's because jobs open up really unpredictably, and they're often in like places where you wouldn't normally choose to live in. So like a small town, a rural state, or like a city that's like really far away from your family or your close friends. And also, because the job market is so competitive, you're basically competing nationally and like sometimes globally for like a few slots. And if you want to stay in academia, you may need to move to wherever that offer is, not where you want to actually live. So like, are you okay with like having very little control over where you live? So if you picked no, again, you get the outcome of reconsider, think carefully, because academia could trap you in this way, because jobs are really scarce and they're tied to geography rather than your own preference. And if location flexibility matters to you, then I think you should consider alternatives like industry research, policy work, or like getting a teaching role where there's more stable local demand wherever you want to live. But if you picked yes, I'm okay with not having much control over where I live geographically, then you get the outcome of proceed cautiously in grad school, pick your advisor carefully, verify any placement data, and finish your program fast, and good luck. Cool. So that wraps up all the outcomes for if you want to do a PhD for tenure track academia. We're now going to move on to if your required degree is in medicine, dentistry, nursing, vet, or pharmacy. If that is the type of required degree you want to do, the first question for that is, do you fully understand the depth, the lifestyle, and the years of training that you're going to have to do for this outcome for this future? Because med, vet, dental, pharmacy, nursing path, they often mean like 10, 12 years of studying and residency, and also like $100,000 to $300,000 in loans, 60 to 80 hour weeks, and it might also mean delayed milestones, right? So like in terms of your income, family, housing, do you have a full picture understanding of the reality of going into this degree? And another thing is, have you actually talked to current students or residents before committing to this, and are you sure of this and understand what it requires of you? So you can pick yes or no for this option. If you picked no, then I would say stop, talk to current students and residents, do more research, be more aware of what it is that you're taking on before you commit to something that will impact your life significantly, okay? Because these paths can take like 7 to 12 years and a lot of debt, so think carefully before you make a decision. If you picked yes, I do know what this job requires of me, then you get the option of proceed, go for it. Because if you want the license role, then there is no alternative, but just know it's gonna be really rough. Good luck. I'm wishing you the best of luck. Okay, moving on. If the type of degree that you want to do is a law JD or like a GDL, then the first question for that is the program that you want to get into a top program with strong verifiable placements? So what I mean here by like a top program, I know that that sounds really, it's not like phrased well. So what I mean by this is that in law, unfortunately, a lot of outcomes are still extremely tied to the school's reputation and network. And again, you can individually decide whether or not you agree with the fairness of that, with the reality of that. I'm not trying to pass judgment on whether or not that's fair in this video, because that's not the point of this video, but the reality of the industry is that a lot of graduates from elite or nationally recognized programs often access top firms, judiciary roles, policy work that is much more difficult to get into if you went to a lower ranked school, which often leaves graduates with a lot of debt and not a lot of great employment outcomes. So when you're considering programs, you should definitely check bar passage rates, training contract, or like pupillage success rates, check alumni destinations, and like check employer links in your destination. Just have a very clear picture of exactly what it is that your program, the outcomes of your program will give you before you make a decision. So if you picked no, the program I'm considering doesn't really give me strong verifiable placement, or like it doesn't have the outcomes of what I would like to get out of this degree, then you get the option of be careful, reconsider, think about your options, because oversupply in law especially is real. It's very real. And outside of top programs, the return of your investment is often negative because lots of graduates struggle with securing training contracts or like pupillage, getting stable legal work. I personally have seen this because I was in law, so I would consider alternatives like paralegaling roles, which are also on their own very hard to get into, or like compliance, policy, government, or like also entering law adjacent fields or like law adjacent jobs where you can still use your legal skills, but you don't need a JD or like a law qualification or like to get the debt of grad school in order to get these jobs. Okay, going back up, if you, however, said yes, the program I'm considering is top tier, it does have strong verifiable placement, then you get the outcome of proceed, but only with clear goals of where you want to get into in law. So for example, if you want to get into like big law, policy, academia, or specific practice areas like family law, criminal law, etc. But just know it is very difficult. The burnout is still real. Don't just apply for prestige. Okay, moving back up. So the final category here for like strictly requiring grad school degrees is if your degree is in psychology, therapy, or social work. So the first question for this is, do you know what license it is that you're pursuing? So for example, are you pursuing a PhD, a PsyD, MSW, LPC, MFT, etc.? So you can pick no or yes for the question. If you picked no, then pause, stop, research the licensing paths first. Don't just enroll into any program blindly, because the outcomes will differ very widely depending on what it is that you want, the actual licensing path that you want to be in. If you picked yes, I do know what license that I want, the follow-up question from that is, will the program that you're considering right now provide accredited supervision hours that are required for the licensure that you want to get? So what I mean by this is that getting a degree here alone is not going to make you a psychologist or like a therapist or like a social worker. You probably know this if you're watching this video, but you also need like thousands of supervised client hours. You need to be signed off by like accredited supervisors. Without this, you can still graduate, but you're not going to legally be allowed to practice. So the question is, did you check if the program that you're considering is accredited and whether or not placements are guaranteed? So if you picked no, then I would stop, because without accreditation or like supervision, your degree is not going to let you practice in your area anyway, okay? So if your program isn't accredited, then you should look at accredited clinical training routes, or like consider adjacent fields that might not require licensing. Or you could also look at like short-term credentials with like clearer return on your investment. So for example, if you want to do like a coaching certification or even a counseling diploma with recognized accreditation. If you, however, picked yes, my program will give me the supervision hours that require licensure, there's going to be placement, blah, 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 then proceed. Grad school is going to be the only route to clinical practice, and good luck. Okay, so that wraps up all of the options for like if grad school is strictly required for whatever job it is that you want to do. So we're now going to look at if you answered no to the question of does this job strictly require grad school or licensure. So if you picked no for this, right, grad school is not strictly required. It might be like helpful or it might be optional, but it's not like strictly required for my role. The first question from this is, would grad school significantly improve your chances versus just gaining work experience or like working on your portfolio? So like what I mean by this is like, would going to grad school or like would getting this degree give you access to roles or like salaries or promotions that you realistically couldn't reach within 2 to 3 years of like just work experience or like a portfolio or industry certifications without this degree, if that makes sense? So like you can pick no or yes for this question. So if you picked no for this question, as in grad school wouldn't give me access to like roles, promotions that I couldn't just get on my own without this degree, then you get the option of reconsider. It might be possible that skipping grad school might be the best option for you, because work experience, portfolios, or certifications might actually be a better return on your time and your money. If you, however, picked yes, going to grad school would significantly improve my chances of getting like a better role, a better promotion, a better salary, then the follow-up question from this is the degree or is grad school here mainly for prestige or network that you can't replicate otherwise? So what I mean by this is the main value of your program just the brand name of the program or like the alumni network rather than the actual content of the schooling? And is that network and prestige something that you truly cannot replicate by working or networking directly or just building a portfolio? So again, you can pick no or yes for this question. So if you picked yes, the degree is mainly for the prestige or network that I can't otherwise replicate, then you get the outcome of you should reconsider, because skipping might be the best option for you if you're able to build the network directly. So like cold emailing, LinkedIn, industry events, because obviously grad school networking is truly valuable if you are in grad school, but the reality is that it is slower and it's pricier, and you're going to spend years still in schooling not earning a salary while your peers are already building the same connections, possibly equal connections in the real world. If you picked no, the degree is not mainly for prestige or network that I can't otherwise replicate by like networking and like working directly, then the follow-up question here is the 5-year return on investment positive even after factoring tuition costs, living expenses, and lost income? So like here, what I mean is like you should run the math of like, is the cost of tuition of grad school and also your living expenses and like the 2 to 5 years of lost salary that you're not going to be able to earn because you're in grad school and therefore not in a job, does the ROI of what you earn after getting a degree or like after getting a PhD going to grad school here, does that still outweigh all of that? So like, does the realistic salary bump that you get after graduating actually put you ahead of people who didn't go to grad school? So if you picked no for this, again, you get the option of stop, reconsider, think carefully, because it's possible there's no compelling ROI here and you might just have to reassess your path or like negotiate funding, delay, save money, get employer sponsorship, or like just build your portfolio or work experience first, reapply to grad school later if the math makes sense or if it actually would give you a good return on what you put into it. If, however, you picked yes, I think the 5-year ROI is going to be good, then follow-up question from this is, do you have verified outcomes from this program? So like, do you have evidence that graduates from this program, this specific program, end up in the jobs that you want or like the kind of pay level that you want to be at? Okay, so like in a realistic time frame. So evidence here might be like published placement stats or like real salary data, alumni that you spoken to, or like employers who consistently hire graduates out of this program. So if you picked no for this question, then again, pause, get actual data, talk to current students and alumni, and see if the program still suits your goals. If, however, you picked yes, there are verified outcomes from this program, then follow-up question from this is, do you fit the day-to-day work style of grad school? So like, do you match the specific style of grad school, which might involve reading hundreds of papers that are dense and technical and probably boring, writing endless essays or proposals or reports, doing long unstructured projects where no one checks in on you daily, and like the deadlines are very far away. They might be like months away, years away. Are you able to self-regulate, be able to set your own schedule and stick to a schedule? Can you deal with rejection? For example, papers not being expected, experiments failing, advisors being kind of shitty or like being unimpressed with you. Are you okay with solitary work? Because a lot of grad school is going to be like you alone in a lab, or like you alone in the library, or like you alone in front of your laptop. Okay, so like consider whether or not you're the type of person that likes to work in that way. If you're the type of person that likes really clear deadlines or like tight deadlines, fast feedback, then grad school might clash with your working style. I would reconsider. If you're someone that actually gets a lot of energy or like fulfillment from like slow burn problem solving and like digging deep into an issue, independent projects, then this might mean that the style of grad school might be better suited for you. So if you picked no for this, I don't think the working style of grad school would be right for me, then you get the outcome of, before committing to grad school, you should test drive the lifestyle of grad school. So what I mean by this is like, try and see if you in grad school, you would actually enjoy yourself. Okay, so like take a short role as like a researcher or like a teaching assistant, be a lab tech or like a contact researcher. So like dip your toes into like what it feels like to be in grad school before you commit, because a lot of grad school is like unstructured time. So like there's no fixed hours. It's a lot of like self-driven reading and like writing and research, and like constant rejection from people rejecting your papers or your grants or your job applications. And if you find that you're not able to handle these things, or if you don't enjoy handling these things, likely you're not going to enjoy grad school. If, however, you picked yes, I do think I match the day-to-day work style of grad school, then follow-up question from this is, what type of degree are you considering here? So you can pick out of 3 options here. The first one is an MBA or a business-focused master's degree. The second one is humanities or social science master's degree. And the final one is STEM or like a professional master's degree. So like a master's in engineering or like data science, MS, etc. Okay, starting with the first one, which is MBA or like a business-focused master's degree. So the first question here is, do you have clear goals about what you want to do or like where you want to be post-degree? And also, is the program prestigious itself? So what I mean by this is, number one, do you know what you would use the specific degree for? So like, for example, if you want to be like, I want to move from software engineering into product management at a major tech company, and doing the MBA at blah, blah, blah school has really good placement record for that role. Like, is that you? Do you know specifically what it is that you want to get out of this? And number two, when I say, is the program prestigious, what I mean by this is this program one where like the name or the network meaningfully boosts your chances for a good career or like a good role after your degree? I'm really sorry if this sounds elitist or snobby, but like the question here is that, again, unfortunately, the name and prestige, and we can debate whether or not this is fair or this is a good thing, the prestige still matters a lot for certain degrees. So like previously I said, for law school, it matters for that. For master's degree, it does matter for this. For MBAs, it does matter, because the return on your investment isn't evenly distributed, and the brand name and the alumni network often still carries disproportionate weight. So like, really easy, obvious example here, if you get an MBA from like Harvard or Stanford or Wharton, that's gonna open more doors to like consulting or finance jobs than if you went to like a mid-tier MBA. Like a mid-tier MBA is not gonna give you the same opportunity. So if you picked no for this, I don't really have clear post-degree goals, and the program is not going to like provide me with the name and network that I want to like get me to where I want to go, then you get the outcome of, I'd really reconsider whether or not you would apply to this specific program. Because top MBAs, they can open doors to like consulting, banking, leadership, if you're like someone that wants a prestigious or like a recruiting pipeline. Mid-tier MBAs cost almost just as much as these, but they don't give you the same access. Like the network is weaker, salaries are probably lower, and a lot of graduates end up in roles that they could have reached without getting this degree anyway. A couple of exceptions here is like, if your employer is funding your degree, then obviously go for it, or like if the school has a really strong local network that's actually tied to your industry. Otherwise, the ROI is usually not going to be great after your tuition and also like the lost earnings because you were in grad school. if you however picked yes, I do have very clear goals of what I want to do after my degree, and also the program is prestigious enough to get me to where I want to go specifically, then you get the outcome of proceed, because an MBA can really help your career depending on what your specific career goals are. But again, you should weigh the costs and outcomes, because at a top program, obviously the brand, the alumni network can like jumpstart you, like kick you up into like consulting, finance, executive pipelines, executive roles. But like there's still going to be tuition and 2 years of lost salary against the roles that you'd realistically land anyway. So like if the ROI is like really clear, it's like really obvious that there's a really high salary post MBA, or like if you're sponsored by your employer, then go for it. Or if you can like pivot into a field that's otherwise closed if you don't have a master's program, then it can be worth it. Okay, moving on to the next type of degree. If you picked humanities or social science masters, if that's the type of grad school that you're considering, the first question here is this a stepping stone to a fully funded PhD? So what I mean by this is like some people do a master's in humanities or like social sciences, not because the master's itself has strong ROI in itself. So like ROI here, what I mean by this is like, does this degree lead to a high paying or a stable job on its own? Okay, so like if it might not do that necessarily, but people might still do a humanities or like a social science master's here anyway, because they want to like strengthen their application for a fully funded PhD later. For example, the master's would be like you showing research ability or your ability to like write a thesis or get faculty recommendations. So the question is like, does this master's meaningfully boost your odds of getting funded later? So you can pick yes or no for this question. So if you pick no for this question, then you get the outcome of be careful and think carefully about what you want to do, because lots of like terminal academic masters, so terminal masters here, what I mean is like this degree is like the final degree that you can earn in this track, right? It's like not your way onto like a PhD or like another degree. A lot of these terminal academic masters, they're often like really quite expensive programs with very little funding and not awesome job outcomes at the end, which means you're likely going to take on some debt without a clear payoff. If, however, you said, yes, this master's is a stepping stone to a fully funded PhD, then you get the outcome of proceed only if this is funded and it aligns with a realistic PhD plan. So what I mean by realistic PhD plan is, so you should consider things like demand. So does your discipline have actually that remain and is not oversaturated? Does your discipline actually have tenure track jobs or funded research opportunities that you could possibly get? Another thing is program outcomes. So does this master's feed into PhDs that are funded and have verifiable placement records? So verifiable placement records, as I mentioned previously, it's like, do you have data that like people in this specific master's program get into PhDs that you also want to be in? Like, do you have evidence that this is happening? Another consideration, advisor fit. So like your advisor, do you know the kind of research you want to do and like what advisors, what academics, or what scholars you want to work with? And finally, personal capacity. Are you personally prepared for like 5 to 7 years of most likely pretty low income geographic immobility? Because as I mentioned previously, because jobs are so hard to come by, if you get one, it might be like in a weird place. Are you willing to travel to like work in like a place where like, you know, like geographically you don't have a lot of options? And are you okay with like a high rejection rate? Another thing is, do you have a good support system to survive being in grad school? So like support here being savings, obviously, but also outside friends, family, communities to like help you keep your mental health in check. Do you have a good advisor? Do you have a healthy advisor? Do you have peers? Do you have coping routines, etc.? Okay, so those are all of the options for humanities or social science masters. We're now going to discuss the final one, which is STEM or professional masters. So like if you want to do like a master's in engineering or like data science or like MS, etc. STEM professional master's degrees. The first question here is, does prestige or network clearly boost your career trajectory here? So what I mean here is like in STEM or like professional fields especially, the prestige of the program and the strength of the alumni network often directly affects hiring outcomes. So like if you went to, let's say you did MS at Stanford, then you might go into FANG, right? Or like if you did a master's in finance at like LSE, then you might get into like a very elite firm. So like, does the program name and network give you actually like a clear edge in your target job market? So you can pick yes or no for this question. If you picked no for this, then you get the outcome of, I would strongly reconsider. I would think about alternatives. So instead of like a self-funded master's, you might explore contract work or like apprenticeships, industry recognized credentials, because these often open the same doors or like get you to the same career place that you want to be in without the same upfront cost of doing this degree. If, however, you picked yes, doing this degree and like the prestige and network will clearly boost my trajectory, then you get the outcome of proceed, but proceed selectively. So like only if there's verified outcomes. So again, verified outcomes, I mean like placement data, salary data, employment demand data, and like the network value. If these like clearly outweigh the full cost here being tuition, living expenses, loss outcome. If the math adds up there, then proceed carefully. But if not, there might be cheaper options like certifications, portfolios, projects, or like your employer paying for you to upskill yourself or like go to grad school. It might give you equal or better ROI. So that wraps up the entire diagram for should you go to grad school. I hope that was helpful. That was an absolute mouthful to film. And before the video ends, I want to make something clear in this video. I probably should have put this disclaimer at the beginning, but like the disclaimer is like this video is not an attempt of me hating or criticizing academia or people who pursue advanced education. I think that learning and schooling is so incredibly valuable and necessary. I think people pursuing wider education is deeply admirable, and if you're someone that's deeply passionate about a certain field or a certain subject or research and that requires grad school, I think that's very important, and I think that's wonderful that I think it's very noble to be able to do that. But the reason that I wanted to make this video is because the fact is that at least today, the reality of academia is very different from the ideal of academia because the costs are higher, the job market is tougher, and the return on your investment or like of your time and also your money is like often not what people expect. If you love your subject, then obviously by all means, I think you should pursue it, but I think you should always do it with your eyes open and ideally with funding and with the full knowledge of what it is that you're putting your time and your effort into, right? And if you want to consider grad school not really for like because you have like a strong desire to pursue a certain field, that's also okay, right? Because it might just be that you want to advance your career advancement. But the thing here is that there's often also cheaper and faster ways to get there. So like work experience, certifications, networking, side projects. Education doesn't just happen within universities or like within grad school, and I think that's worth saying out loud or worth reminding people of. And also for full transparency for this video, right? Me making this video, you might have seen that on this channel I do like some school videos, I do some like career videos. It's a fucking weird channel. I don't really know what the niche is. But anyway, full transparency here is my background is that I studied law in the UK where I graduated with an undergraduate degree in law. Okay, so like I did an LLB. So for those of you that don't know, in the UK you can study like law or like architecture. You can study medicine as like an undergraduate degree. So I have a law undergraduate degree, and then I studied the SQE. So that's kind of like the bar exam in the US, but it's not like a full grad school it's not like a full master's program. I don't have a grad, it's not like technically grad school in the way that we're talking about it here. So this video isn't based on my personal experience as a graduate student. It's only based on research that I've conducted online, and also because I'm friends with a lot of people that are in grad school or have like gone through grad school. So please do not only use this video and what I say in this video as a determiner of like whether or not you go to grad school, okay? Because I've tried really hard to make this a useful video. There's not a lot of like haha funny jokes in this video because I think it's a pretty serious topic. Ultimately, this is a YouTube video. Please do your own research, be thoughtful about it and like what you're gonna do, because grad school is a lot of time and it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of your time and money basically. And so I wanted to make this video just in case you didn't consider all this, but you're someone that maybe just graduated from your undergraduate, or you're considering grad school, you're passionate about something, you want to like do, I don't know, advance your career, but you didn't consider everything, or like you don't know where to start. Then I thought like a big flowchart would be useful because it covers a lot of ground in like a short amount of time. But obviously this does not paint the full picture of what it's like to be a graduate student or the reality of your own specific scenario. So this is just something to provoke your own thoughts and for you to kind of get into researching your own options. But I hope it was helpful. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in more videos like this, I do a lot of like career related videos. You can check out this playlist or like this video, or you can check out this video that YouTube thinks you should watch next.